don't think we've seen much of that kind of slinging criticism at the royal family for a long time now. And perhaps this is hopefully the end of that, and that they can go on to kind of, doing what he does best, which is this sort of thing.
And we saw
Funny for a good cause.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Royals with Roya and Kate.
Roya Nikar, Royal Editor of the Sunday Times.
And Kate Mounsey, Royal Editor of the Times.
And today, we're talking about two very different people united over their concerns for the environment as the King paid tribute to Lord Prescott.
And Prince Harry, Jelly Roll, and the tattoo.
Plus beards and breeches at the annual diplomatic reception at the palace.
This is a big story here in the UK, and so we start with a royal tribute.
From the King to a politician.
King Charles has paid a warm personal tribute to John Prescott, saying he remembered with great fondness his unique and indomitable character.
The former Deputy Prime Minister died at the age of 86.
John Prescott was Deputy Prime Minister here in the UK for 10 years, during the Blair years, the longest-serving Deputy Prime Minister, under the premiership of Tony Blair. He was also one of the staunchest champions of trade unions. He was working class and from a background very different to royalty. His father was a railway worker and his mother worked in domestic service, and he left school at 15 with no qualifications.
But King Charles and Lord Prescott had much more in common than you might think. They met many times over the years and they bonded through tea drinking, a wicked sense of humour, and the Kyoto Protocol, an international agreement on climate change set in the 1990s. So an unlikely pair, Kate.
You would think so, wouldn't you? That they would be quite an unlikely pair. But they did see eye to eye and actually supported each other from time to time, didn't they? There was a moment when John Prescott wrote in the Sunday Mirror at one point that the King, then the Prince of Wales, should be able to write to whoever he wanted to write to. That was at the time when Charles was under fire for writing what was called the kind of spider memos, when he was firing off handwritten notes to cabinet ministers about what they should be doing, particularly on areas that interested him, areas in which he was passionate about, like the environment. And Prescott came riding to his rescue in a way. So there was more in common than perhaps we think.
And a big sort of, I suppose, one big topic where they really were always eye to eye was on climate change. And John Prescott was a big campaigner for that. And as we've said, absolutely a key person at the Kyoto climate talks in 1997, when he actually led the UK delegation. And for those who don't know, the Kyoto Protocol was the first time nearly all the United Nations member states committed themselves to cutting greenhouse gas emissions. And you can imagine that's something that Charles massively backed and was delighted about. And so, as far as you might not necessarily think their politics were aligned, actually, behind the scenes, their politics were much more aligned than anyone might think. I absolutely love the detail of their friendship and their meetings, in that John Prescott obviously felt so comfortable in Charles's company that he used to, and this came out in Tony Blair's memoirs, he used to sit back and chat to the now King when he was Prince of Wales and rest his cup of tea on his tummy. And Charles, the first couple of times he saw this,
quite perturbed,
was slightly perturbed and thought, and actually said, I think he said to Tony Blair at one point, he wondered whether it was, do you think, is that a sort of gesture or a sign of hostility or class enmity or something? And Tony Blair reassured him that no, it was actually because John Prescott was so comfortable in his presence, and that was just a kind of Prescott kind of trick.
He does it to everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I sometimes rest my cup of tea on my tongue when we have a tea break here, as you know.
There's no tummy to rest it on, Roya.
Well,
I think we both know that.
I'll pay you later. But I just love that image. I think it's such a wonderful image of, this tub-thumping Green campaign. Although the one thing they didn't agree on, I suspect, although we never heard from Charles on it, was John Prescott did say about the Green Belt that it was for building on. And I suspect Charles, being a great campaigner of preserving green space, probably didn't love that policy.
Probably didn't love that. But there was,
the tea probably wobbled on the tummy then.
But I think that element of the monarchy and the left wing and the Labour government in general is quite interesting, isn't it? That kind of, how do they compare and how do they come together, and where they sort of overlap as well. But there was a kind of warmth between them as well when Lord Prescott's mother died in 2003. Charles wrote a handwritten letter to him to express his sympathy. So there was a kind of he didn't have to do that. That was a very kind of personal element as well. And I think when Charles was under fire, having somebody come to their rescue from the Labour government, somebody so senior, to say, he can write as many letters as he likes, is what Prescott said, saying that Charles had a lot to offer the country. And that would have meant quite a good deal to Charles, who I think is quite loyal. When people are loyal to him, I think he reciprocates that.
Yes, he's big into loyalty. So the top line here is that the king and two Jacks were great mates, bonded over climate change and belly balancing cups of tea.
And when eggs were thrown at John Prescott, there was a slightly different reaction, of course, because he then, at one point there was an altercation, let's say, when he thumped somebody. Tony Blair's reaction was, well, John is John.
I was listening to the Times Radio naturally this week, listeners, and Margaret Hodge was talking about John Prescott, and obviously this incident came up. And actually, I think she was talking to a Conservative MP who remembered the brilliant thing that John Prescott said, which was when Tony Blair rang him up and went, what on earth? John, what are you doing? And John said, I'm doing exactly what you asked me to. And Tony Blair said, what do you mean you're doing what you asked me to? I'm connecting with the British public.
Yeah, I'm not sure skin on skin connection was what Tony Blair had in mind.
No, but he had a great sense of humour, and the king is known to have a very good sense of humour, and I think the two of them also, they found each other quite funny as well.
I love that skit when he was interviewed and he said, oh, do you know what, I've stuffed that up, let's do that again. And they said, oh, sorry, we're live. It's too late.
Oops. Anyway, and there's lots of nice anecdotes. So I think you're right. I think the whole idea of John Prescott and the king getting on just busts the myth that a lot of people just assume that members of the royal family are all Tories or must be conservative leaning. And actually, although the royal family must be above politics, it's much more nuanced than that, isn't it, behind the scenes?
It is more nuanced than that. And I think what was interesting as well, that it took the palace about 12 hours between the news of John Prescott's death breaking and them coming out with this tribute. It's quite late on in the day. So I think a lot of thought have been given to how they would say, what they would say behind the scenes, which was interesting.
Yeah, rather than just have a flunky. You allowed to call them that? Write it for him. We just did. Courtier. Anyway, talking about a sense of humour.
Yeah.
This week, Prince Harry reminded us that he does still have one. There was a lot of speculation rife in September, wasn't there, when Harry was seen going in and out of a tattoo parlour.
There were pictures, weren't there, of him going into a tattoo parlour in New York.
Flurry of speculation amongst the royal correspondents.
What tattoo had he got? Was it the first tattoo?
Meghan forever.
I Heart Dad.
Probably
Maybe.
not. I Heart Will's probably even less likely. But
Bros
no,
forever.
It's come to light that it was actually a spoof skit, which we saw this week, of him apparently getting a tattoo of "I am Invictus."
I am Jelly Roll. Yeah.
I am Jelly. Bye Jelly. Bye. So in this skit, which listeners you can look up, he's leaning back in a tattoo artist's chair and he's getting a tattoo done by the heavily tattooed American rapper Jelly Roll,
who we're all familiar with his works.
What's your favourite Jelly Roll song, Kate?
I like them all.
My favourite one is "I Love Jelly," and it was nice because Harry, he swears in it. And
lots.
Yeah, he does swear a lot.
It's very sweary.
It is quite sweary. Apart from the swearing, it reminds me very much of that wonderful skit he did in 2016 with the Queen, with the late Queen.
Tell us all about it.
Well, it's when he was going to have the Invictus Games in America, and he came up with this wonderful idea of including Granny, the late Queen, in a spoof sketch. So he's sitting there with her at Buckingham Palace, and she looks so cosy in her cardigan. Oh, and they're having tea, and Harry's phone goes, and it says FLOTUS, and he goes, "Oh, Granny, it's Michelle Obama. Should we watch it together?" So he presses play and plays the message, and it's Michelle and Barack Obama standing there going, "Hey, Prince Harry, remember when you said to bring it for the Invictus Games?" And there's all these army people behind them, and they go boom like that. Boom, mic drop. And then the Queen
delivers the punchline.
Delivers the most perfect punchline, which is, "Oh, please." And he just turns to the camera and goes, boom. Because, of course, he's got the bigger mic drop with the Queen involved in his sketch.
You can't really break that, yeah.
And it was just lovely it was the same sort of lovely, fun Harry tone, wasn't it?
It was the old Harry, I think we can say, the Harry that people used to know and love. He's doing more of this stuff on his own, so they're consciously doing, she's brand building her empire, her lifestyle empire, her jam, her doggy biscuits, whatever that might be, soon to be revealed, no doubt. But he's going back to his roots, looking at charity and humour, the reasons that people connected with him in the first place. So he's in this tattoo parlour with Jelly Roll, who is this big
your favourite rapper, we've discovered.
Yeah, love and he's putting this tattoo on Harry's neck, and Harry's saying, oh, no, and instead of saying I am Invictus, it says I am Jelly Roll, and then he's sort of saying, oh, no, you can't do this. But this is exactly, I think, what he should be doing. This is also Invictus, tying in with Invictus.
It's his baby, isn't it?
It's his baby, 10 years old, this Paralympic-style competition for wounded servicemen and women. Harry reminding the world that he served in Afghanistan for 2 tours of duty. This is something he knows a lot about. There's going to be the first ever winter games for the Invictus early next year in Canada, in Vancouver. And I think that will be a big moment for him. And I think this is all part, it does feel like the kind of cogs turning on the kind of Sussex machine, if you like, that they've kind of got it now. I don't think we've seen much of that kind of slinging criticism at the royal family for a long time now. And perhaps this is hopefully the end of that, and that they can go on to kind of, doing what he does best, which is this sort of thing.
And we saw
him for a good cause.
Yeah. And we saw him in Canada, and he was out in Canada this week, wasn't he? Going into schools and talking about the Invictus Games in schools and saying how, he wanted to take it. He wanted the children to get the message and children to start getting involved in the Invictus Games, and that, for him, what was the phrase he said? This means so much to me because I want the Invictus message to, young people to grasp what he's trying to do. And it was a nice flash of old Harry maybe coming to the fore again. And
it was. And on Remembrance Sunday, I was speaking to some people who are from the Scotties Little Soldiers charity who are marching, and their children who've lost parents in Afghanistan. And I thought, we're kind of moving away from that narrative, I think, sometimes, and let us never forget the sacrifices that were made there. And I think Harry's a great reminder of that. And what he's doing with Invictus is the biggest kind of global reminder of that sacrifice that was made in those recent conflicts, which I think, less does forget. It's a good thing.
So he didn't get a tattoo.
What? It's not real?
Apparently not. Apparently it was just a joke.
I'm getting my Jelly Roll tattoo.
So, but if he had got a tattoo, trivia, Kate, which member of the royal family would he have joined ranks with? Who already has a tattoo?
Doesn't Eugenie have one? Princess Eugenie.
What does she have?
I want to say a dolphin. What is it? I don't know. What's she got? A circle behind her left ear.
Correct.
Okay. So she's already been there and done it.
I wonder if the king got a tattoo when he was in the Navy. I sat next to someone at dinner the other day.
Anchor on the shoulder.
I sat next to someone at dinner last week who'd been in the Navy with the king as a young midshipman on HMS Jupiter. And let me tell you, he told me some stories about the king. No, not here. maybe another episode, maybe my memoirs, but they were crackers. Absolute crackers.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Anyway, it did make great pictures. We loved seeing Harry and Jelly Roll not getting a tattoo. And speaking of great pictures, Kate, there were a few more great royal images this week. What are we particularly excited about this week in terms of great pictures?
My favourite image was the Queen kneeling down as her sister-in-law, the Princess Royal, invested her with a great honour, which is an honorary doctorate of literature from the University of London, the institute of which Princess Anne is Chancellor.
And why did she do that?
Because the Queen's done loads in terms of literacy, promoting literacy, encouraging young kids to read. We've been around the world with her when she's done things in Rwanda, when she's done things all around the world to encourage children to learn to read, and it also inspired that kind of love of reading through her Queen's Reading Room podcast that she started in the coronavirus lockdown, and all that sort of thing. So I think it's really well deserved, because I think some of these honorary degrees and honours, people think, oh, you don't deserve it, you didn't do the work for that. But actually, I think the Queen really, this does mean a lot to her. and for it to be delivered by her sister-in-law in a rare joint engagement was quite interesting to see.
It was very interesting to see, and I loved those images because it made me think about that relationship, which I find
Goes back a long way.
It sure does. I find that relationship really quite fascinating in terms of its depth and where it started and how it has evolved and survived and endured and obviously become much closer into their 70s. So, listeners, we'll take you back, way back before Queen Camilla was married to the king, way back
Even before she was married to
even married to Andrew Parker Bowles, because not all of you might know that a young Princess Anne had a paramour, one Andrew Parker Bowles. Some of you might know this because you might have seen it in The Crown, immortalised in some scenes in The Crown.
Well, they dated, didn't they?
They dated, and they're still great mates. And if you, as we often see at Royal Ascot every year, they're often together. They often go to the races together, Anne and Andrew Parker Bowles. And
Camilla's great mates with her ex-husband as well.
So he's obviously very good at staying on terms with his exes. Well done, Andrew Parker Bowles.
Well done there. It's quite an Aristo trait, isn't it?
Yeah. I can possibly comment, Kate. But it reminded me of, not only obviously it's a very, very long relationship, Camilla and Anne, they've known each other a long time, but there was this lovely documentary last year, BBC documentary made about the King's coronation year. It really focused on the coronation, and there was a really good interview with Princess Anne. And she doesn't talk publicly often about the Queen, but she did. And this is what she said. And it was, from Anne, who's not known for giving lots of high praise to people, all the time. She said this. She said of Camilla, "I've known her a long time, off and on. Her understanding of the role and how much difference it makes to the king has been absolutely outstanding." I loved this bit. "This role is not something that she would have been a natural for."
Well, there's a slight shade. Sorry, carry on.
But she does it really well. And she provides that change of speed and tone.
Yeah, I thought there was some slight shade being, as Jelly Rolls fans might say, being cast in her direction there.
It was Anne basically saying, "I wouldn't have had you down as queen, but now you are queen, you're quite good.
You're all right, yeah.
Yeah, and you're quite good for my brother." And it just was it was so Princess Anne, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, she didn't really have a kind of job as such, did she, Camilla, before she
I think that's a very
became...
No. As Fiona Lansdowne, who's her best mate, who I spoke to last year for a profile of Camilla before the coronation, said, and this was the nicest way a best friend could say it, bless her, she didn't have the longest run up. Basically, she's never had a job.
But she has hit it out of the park. I think we can all agree.
Yeah, she's taken on a big job in her 70s.
Yeah, and beginning of this year, when the King was away, Princess of Wales was away, Prince of Wales were looking after the Princess of Wales, and you turn around and you think, these were the two women, Princess Anne and Camilla. They were holding the fort. Good on the Duchess of Gloucester for stepping in and supporting the Queen.
But she's not as recognisable as she is.
But these two women, you look at these pictures of Anne giving Queen Camilla the doctorate, and you think they are the heart, the spirit of kind of British royal family.
Yeah.
And they are embodying the spirit of the late Queen.
Stalwarts.
Okay, Camilla isn't a blood relation, of course, but they are the stalwarts. They are the ones who are keeping on, getting up, getting on, holding it together. So for me to see them in a kind of joint engagement like this, I thought was really special.
Yeah. So there was another image this week, Kate, which I know you were very, very taken by because you wrote a wonderfully big piece on it.
I think it was 632 words.
632 words on royal breeches. Tell me more.
Breeches. There was
Can't get enough of those breeches.
I love the breeches.
Do you think do you reckon you'll get a pair in the post now?
I hope so.
Do you reckon you'll get some royal breeches
Are they just
merch?
the blokes? Because I think that's sexist. I want.
Well,
some.
I race in them. I ride.
Do you? Of course
when
you
I
do.
When I ride out in Lambourne, I wear breeches. I don't wear
And
joggers.
what colour are they?
I've got a black pair and a khaki pair.
Oh, do you have any pink ones?
I raced them. Are you joking?
You had your pink top.
I raced in white ones.
Yeah.
That were very slippery. And no, those are my silks with the pink silks.
I feel like we're getting into OnlyFans territory.
Sorry, guys. We're talking about when I did a race last year. We digress from Charles's breeches.
Anyway, Tuesday night, I'll bring you back. Or let's bring it back. Back at Buckingham Palace for the Diplomatic Corps reception. This is an annual event where very high profile, high commissioners, ambassadors, I'm sure there's Ferrero Rocher involved.
I
Other
was gonna
chocolates
say
are available.
that. I was going to say that. That's Ferrero Rocher.
Tons of people, 1,500 guests. And the King was there, of course, with the Queen. And the Prince of Wales showed up as well. It's time for all the medals, the finery. The Queen was wearing a tiara, aquamarine and diamond, which had belonged to the late Queen. And she was seen wearing it in Yellowknife. Very popular location in Canada for royal tours. We've been there loads. I'm sure we'll be there again. So Queen looked great, but actually the story in my newsroom was all about what the King was wearing.
Jaunty legs in his jaunty breeches.
He had wanted, there was lots of discussion last year about whether he would be allowed to wear his breeches for the coronation, as previous kings have done. And the decision was made after much deliberation, I'm told, that he should not, that a more modern trouser, Royal Navy trousers.
He didn't flash his pins at the coronation.
He didn't, but he wanted to.
He had his revenge on Tuesday.
His revenge was on Tuesday. There he was in his silk stockings.
There's nothing modern about a king in silk stockings. Let's be honest.
Do you know what? I think he looked brilliant, and good for him because he rocked it.
Now, William, on the other hand, took one look at the breeches and went, not so much, and put on a long trouser, didn't he?
He was there in white tie, wasn't he?
White,
with the beard.
With the beard.
Still the beard.
He's not going for a beard and breeches combo, is he? He's like, it's too much. No.
Just embrace it. I love that. I love that about the King. He's like, I don't care. You know, I'm going to embrace tradition.
What do you think of those buckle shoes, Kate?
The buckle shoes, I'm told, cost £3,500. I bet there were more, but that's what I was told.
£3,500?
Yeah. Bespoke made by a brilliant chap, I'm told, called Tony Gazziano. From Kettering, who made them for the coronation. They've got another outing. There's not many places you can wear that.
There's nowhere else.
What's called an opera pump with a family buckle.
Do you know what that opera pump reminds me of?
Go on.
It reminds me a little bit of town crier shoes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Actually, the whole outfit says town crier.
It's quite town crier. Just give him a bell.
Brilliant. I'm not. It looks fab.
Anyway, there you go. That's your royal fashion hit for this week,
yes, there
listeners. So, William was rocking a beard but no breeches at the palace. Mm-hmm. But this week, he was also in Newport, wasn't he, Kate? He went to Newport, which is one of 6 locations as part of his homelessness initiative, where he and partners and advocates are going into these 6 locations in order to try and tackle homelessness, particular issues in those areas on the ground. Yeah. He was in Belfast last week, where I went with him, and that was all looking at young people in care and coming out of care, which has been identified as high priority in Northern Ireland and Belfast. And in Newport, one of the high priority issues they've identified there is women, vulnerable women, becoming homeless through lots of issues: poverty, domestic violence, family breakdown. So he was there,
and who knows better than anyone on that subject is our pal, Sabrina Cohen-Hatton, who, if you're a regular listener to the podcast,
which we hope you are,
and if you're not, go back and listen to this episode.
Why aren't you?
We interviewed Sabrina Cohen-Hatton, who has been massively helping the Prince of Wales with this, because she, as a teenager, was homeless herself on the streets of Newport.
She was.
And now, extraordinary, you know, she's a doctor, she's a chief fire officer, she's written books. She's extraordinary. So do go back and listen to that if you haven't already. But she was there with William in Newport and looking at vulnerable women on the streets. And he met a woman called Rebecca, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he just said, she talked about her father and her partner. Was it her? I'm going to check it. She talked about 2 people close to her who had died, and she'd found herself on
gone
the
into a spiral, hadn't she? Yeah.
Yeah. You know, as a teenager, very vulnerable. And, you know, had a terrible kind of mental health crisis, as anybody would in that situation. And William just said, I don't think I would have coped as well as you did in that scenario. And I think we need more Rebeccas in the world.
One of the things, actually, that it is worth doing, if you're vaguely interested in the subject, is going back to listen to Sabrina's episode with us a few weeks ago, just simply because through her own lived experience of homelessness, she speaks very eloquently in that episode about why, as a woman being homeless, things are particularly dicey. It's horrendous being homeless, whether you're a man or woman, but there are issues that only women face, which Sabrina talked about and talked very movingly about and quite shockingly about, which, you know, she'd experienced. And it's worth just listening to her perspective on that. So I think it's great, so great that she's working with William, because he really can. He can go into Newport and speak to people now who've experienced homelessness, and he has Sabrina, and he can get her advice on what that feels like, what they need to target. But one of the things I thought was quite interesting was when he said he wanted to be the disruptor in his fight against homelessness, and he said he wanted to throw the paperwork up in the air and rip up the rule book and just do things a bit differently. And because obviously, he's all about. What he always says is lots of great people on the ground are doing great things, but we want to put them all together. And actually, sometimes that just means a little bit of convention going out the window and getting them all stuck in. Yeah,
and I think all power to him. He's putting the time in on the subject that he's really passionate about. And Sabrina, if anyone saw the TV documentary about this as a 2-parter, she stars quite heavily in that. So that was fantastic to see